Regina Malik. Discussion of the agenda. All those in favor? Opposed? The agenda is approved. On a motion to approve the minutes. Madam Regina. Discussion of the minutes. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion, the minutes are approved. Moving on, looks like we have no unfinished business, so we're going to move on to new business.
We have our, you're too quick.
Too quick. Yes. All right. If we have, do we have the Lansing team? No.
Not yet.
Okay. If there are no objections, I would say we just skip to number 4, our federal legislative update. Take it away, Andy.
All right. Well, good afternoon to everyone. I wish I had more uplifting news to report here, but we are in day 27 of a shutdown. The president, the House is out of session. And so there's the big development since I talked with all of you last and even since last week is that this morning, or it might even been over the weekend, but sort of got a lot of notoriety this morning, the AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees, came out and said, it is time to end this shutdown. Friday, the 24th, was the first day that federal employees received 0 paycheck. They had gotten like a 70% paycheck back on October 10th. Military members will miss their paycheck on Friday. Congressional House staff will miss their paycheck on Friday. Senate staff missed their paycheck last week. And so trying to read tea leaves, if you asked me to predict what was going to happen, I would say that the AFGE will probably not make Democrats officially change their position and see everyone vote for an end to the shutdown. But it does give a little bit of an off-ramp to folks that don't have to worry about the political fallout that might come from voting to reopen the government. So that would include folks like Gary Peters, who's not running for re-election, Senator Shaheen in New Hampshire. Senator Durbin was very wishy-washy in an interview this afternoon about whether or not he was going to change his position. And something like AFGE could give the Virginia senators enough cover to maybe say, hey, I have hundreds of thousands of constituents that aren't getting paid and I need to, support them. If that happened, that would be the magic 5 that you would need in addition to the 3 Democratic senators that have already voted to open up the government. They're scheduled to vote again tomorrow, be the 13th vote. I don't know how to predict it, but just thinking about it logically, I don't know why, if you're going to flip your position, you wouldn't do it tomorrow and try to get this open in time to make sure people by the end of the week get paid. I think you get the worst of both worlds if you drag this out for another week and then flip on Thursday or Friday. People still miss their paycheck. You still have not gotten anything in return for flipping, and it's just made it worse. So I think tomorrow's vote will be very key to watch. If there are not 8 Democrats tomorrow, I think we are still in this for the long haul. There won't be any sort of compromise deal this week with the president in Asia. I don't know how they could realistically put together some kind of deal to end the shutdown without the involvement of the president. And it's not, he's in Asia, as well as all of the people that you would, the Treasury Secretary, others that you would normally expect to be engaged in those high-level discussions. So I think the options are enough Democrats change their position because of AFGE, or we continue on in the shutdown. November 1st, they put out notices, and this is probably maybe most important to you, is that the SNAP benefits and WIC are going to run out of funding, and we're going to start to see sort of much more of an impact of the shutdown. They've been able to mitigate a fair number of what typically you know, and air traffic controllers and things like that. They've been able to mitigate a lot of that through money from other places that is all going to run out by the end of this month. And so we started to see reports today of pretty significant delays at LAX and others as air traffic controllers are starting to sort of show their frustration of having to go to work and not getting paid by calling in sick and sort of having an impact on the aviation system. So that's where we stand in terms of the status of the shutdown. What happens after we get out of the shutdown? I do have some optimism that if we can just get over sort of the political hurdle that has led to the shutdown around the ACA subsidies, I think there is probably a compromise out there in some form or fashion on the ACA subsidies with maybe some income caps and some things like that, that would be enough to get the votes required to address that. And I do feel like appropriators, Dems and Republicans in both the House and Senate, are probably the best folks in Congress at working together. And I think that you would likely, if they get the blessing from their leadership, you would see that they are very likely able to put together a deal in, you know, a month or less to try and sort of fund the government at FY26 levels. I do have some optimism on that front. That's important because that's where the community project that we submitted would be funded. And so, you know, we continue to watch that very closely, but none of that will happen until after we get through this shutdown. I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't know if I have any more answers, but I'm happy to try.
Sure. Right, any questions? No?
No. I mean, thank you for that update. I mean, it is what it is. I don't know that there's much we can do. So,
no, I think this will be a big week as to whether or not it gets resolved or whether this just continues to go on with no real end in sight. There are a few factors this week that could move the needle.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Looks like we're joined by our state legislative team now. So let's move back to item 1, marijuana licensing. And who wanted to address this? Yeah. Do you want to?
Oh, sure, yeah. So our planning commission is reviewing some of the various stipulations and ordinance regulations around marijuana businesses in Ann Arbor, and I have seen that it's been in the state news that the Senate is considering several bills as part of like a budget part 2 compromise. So just curious, you know, if any of those could impact the city and in which way, as we consider making changes on our end. On our last city council meeting, I brought it up in our session if any of these state level bills could impact the changes we're considering on this end. And the changes we were considering on October 20th, Attorney Reiser for the city did not think there was any overlap, but there could be some interaction in the future. So that's where that originated.
Yeah, appreciate that. So there was a hearing, Senate committee hearing on a broad package. They're kind of 2 components. Several bills in one of the packages dealt more on the hemp side and with that intoxicating hemp and regulating that. And then of, I would say, more kind of broad bipartisan support on and a lot of discussion around. Also part of that hearing, there are 2 bills that were introduced that would restrict how many, restrict the ability of new marijuana, cannabis committee. And, you know, the bills as introduced originally used a threshold of 1 per 5,000. The substitutes that were taken up in committee used a threshold of 1 per 10,000 residents. So very restrictive. Now, it doesn't remove anyone's license today. It would allow those who are have a license to sell or transfer that to another entity to, you know, so it's not lost or, you know, only grandfathered with that, whoever holds that license. It could be sold and maintained, but it does kind of put that limit on going forward, so would have restrictions in there. Now, there was testimony, I know we shared, and I don't know if it was circulated, but Mariah has kind of the notes from committee, a lot of it, so kind of the deliberation kind of back and forth. That might be helpful just to kind of see that, but I will point out, and one thing want to flag in that package, and I think is worth some discussion, there were some conversations, there are House members that are getting pulled into this effort too, and it's very much bicameral, bipartisan. But I know there was mention in the committee deliberations on these two particular bills on the cannabis side, in that possibly making exceptions for resort communities. And I think thinking where, okay, they have a big population that comes during the summer months or what have you, may not be their total residents, and trying to create some balance there or accommodation there. I think a similar argument could be made for university communities. You have a large student population that may not be permanent residents, but, you know, that should be categorized in as well. And so there may be opportunities. So I just put that out there. The resort communities did come up in the discussion, and there may be an interest in, you know, for the city in that regard as a university community. So flag that. The other thing I wanted to mention, just because this did get a lot of attention and initial feedback when we flagged that, we did reach out to Senator Irwin and Senator Schenck, your senators, and just let them know that the city was looking into this, may have some concerns, and that we would follow up, but left it there. Did get feedback from Senator Irwin's staff. I think he has his own concerns, and at this point is not supportive on those bills. Senator Schenck was eager to have feedback and appreciated the heads up. Just committee, they promised they were not going to like rush anything through, continue deliberations. It's just been the one hearing thus far. Committee is meeting this week. It's not on the agenda. So I think we have time to have conversations around that, but just wanted to share that. I don't know if there are any questions. Looks like Mariah may have one.
No questions. Hi team. We're joining from Tampa, and it may or may not be 84 degrees. I'm not trying to rub that in, but we're at the ICMA conference, and we did want to add it on. Andrea, Aaron, and I had a lot of conversation about it. My biggest concern for the committee to kind of have discussion about, I would like to strongly oppose it. I have concerns over the reduction in local control and eliminating the ability for the council to make a decision on if there's going to be a reduction, where the spaces between schools, all of the in-betweens. I think the council should be able to set that, and it shouldn't be a state in state legislature's hands. And I think every community's needs vary. There was, and I can share the document that Andrea had shared from the discussion for everyone to review. There were some smaller businesses in the city of Detroit that had some concerns over being minority-owned businesses and sometimes being priced out of the market based on the competition between businesses. And again, I think it kind of determines on where the council lands, and if that is a topic of discussion and wanting to have that at the local level is probably most impactful. There has also been discussion of there not potentially being a financial impact, and we know that to not be true. The divvying up of all the funds from the tax happen based on the amount of facilities that we have. And so while there may be a smaller divvy, I think it still impacts, if we have a reduction in facilities, it'll ultimately have a financial impact to the city. And so I would like permission from the board to understand kind of what your position is, and if you're supportive of us strongly opposing the legislation moving forward.
Alrighty.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I agree with everything you just said. I share all of the concerns you shared. I also think that, there doesn't seem to be an acknowledgement that, that while individual municipalities, this is based on the population of the municipality, often a municipality that is allowing cannabis sales by establishment is also a regional hub. We have townships around us that do not allow the sales of cannabis or cannabis establishments. Those are folks who are likely coming to Ann Arbor or to neighboring Ypsilanti, right, to other places to make their purchases. Not factoring them into the conversation is also, problematic for me. And then I also think, it's probably too early to tell, but as you mentioned around some of the concerns that some businesses may have in other communities, I think through our own conversations with constituents, with owners of some of these establishments that are local, there is still an ongoing kind of battle between locally owned. In Ann Arbor, we have one Black-owned facility, and they're regularly competing with these kind of like Walmart-style cannabis businesses that are, the Starbucks cannabis businesses that are the chains that set up in every town and can probably withstand some of this a little bit better than some of the local-owned folks can. And so, yeah, I would join you in saying that I would strongly oppose this.
Councilmember.
Well, I definitely, I join in strongly opposing, but the difference between 1 per 5,000 to 1 per 10,000, like if Ann Arbor was under that 1 per 5,000 standard, it would allow for 26 licenses, which is two less than what we have now. But if it went to 1 per 10,000, that would be 13, and we're not using all the licenses we're currently allowed. I think there's 20, but there's 21 currently operating. That would take us down to 13. That's literally having the number of licenses we'd have in operation, not just in allowed. So
yeah, it doesn't require that you reduce, so you'd be able to stay at your current level, but it doesn't give that opportunity to grow that in any way, shape, or form. So you would be limited and capped at where you are today if you exceed the limit. So yeah, I think a very legitimate point. It only restricts those numbers, and in a way, both you're above either threshold. So it just limits the city's opportunity to license any additional facilities in the future.
And I did see though that if a business doesn't transfer their license when they close down, it does go away though. So
right, you could.
Yeah. So if places can't, as you're saying too, if it's a bigger company that has no incentive to put their license out on the market, they don't care, they just walk away from it, then, sooner or later you lose each license every time that happens, and then we could get down. Theoretically, we could get down.
Yeah, it's not like it's something that the city could claw back.
Exactly, yeah. So I hope we can strongly oppose this. I'm not 100, I understand maybe that there are some, I don't know, some border communities that have outlandish number of marijuana shops, but I think the stat was given that we haven't had any police complaint about at least any of the ones in the distance of the schools, and maybe overall. So I'm not really sure what this is trying to fix. I don't know if you give them more background, but
yeah, it's definitely not something pushed necessarily by communities, by local governments and the associations that represent them. This is more from the industry. I think for those companies that are in the business, in the industry, feel Michigan's market is oversaturated. And so a lot of, there are a lot of the companies that are struggling and looking for some policy changes that would help stabilize the industry. So it's really kind of that effort to support those establishments and especially, I guess, in some communities where they feel it's oversaturated and they struggle to be profitable.
I think that 24% tax also has a push to it as well in trying to divvy up where money goes.
Yeah, I think these policies have been talked about for some time, but definitely in the wake of the road funding plan that was passed and then 24% tax on cannabis. I think for many legislators, it's like, okay, we'll do this, try to do this to offset and create some balance for you in your marketplace. So yeah, that has motivated, I think, some legislative interest in moving on some of these policy issues. That's correct.
Yeah, at first glance, it appears that this is sort of trying to replicate our system for liquor licenses with this idea of trading and everything. And Councilor Dina and I serve on the liquor license committee, and we don't, that doesn't make anything easier there. And, it does obviously pick winners and losers. But I guess the question for us is, obviously I think starting from a position of strong opposed, but then if there is a situation where this seems like it's moving and we want to provide the tweaks to it that would make it work in our context, I mean, I think we should just be watching it very closely, because I think the liquor has taught us a little bit about, the complications that can have getting these licenses. So,
Yeah, I was going to say too, in the committee deliberations, there was, that reference to kind of the model with liquor licenses and that. So definitely kind of use that somewhat as a model. It is different because unlike with, liquor establishments, you have with these, there's a direct revenue source for local communities. So it's a different connection, a little bit, not quite the same, but appreciate that, those comments too, with the opposition, but then if it is moving, potential opportunities. And as I mentioned, they talked about greater flexibility in those limits, population limits for resort communities. And again, maybe an angle that if necessary, we could kind of mirror for university communities and have that, the university student population counted in to give you more flexibility on those thresholds. But we'll have to see kind of where all that goes and if those numbers even make sense. But just put that out there, that may be a potential path if needed.
Thanks.
Good to know. Okay, any other questions? Okay, wonderful. Let's move on to our general state legislative update.
Yeah, I can start. Aaron, if you want to jump in at any point too, feel free. We got the state budget done. We did not shut down. I think you all know that. Road funding plan was done as well. We'll share, there was the House State and Local Transportation Committee just had a briefing from House Fiscal on the road funding plan, and we'll highlight, obviously a lot more dollars going in on that for local roads, increases there, some new pots of money to really help, also additional funds in transit and things like that. But we'll send that and flag a few things for everyone in those committee notes and just that assessment. And I think still a lot more coming. There are already, I think the day it was passed, there were challenges, partly on the cannabis, on that tax. And, so there's some things in flux with that, but at least as passed, a sense of the dollars coming in, and especially for local road funding and areas that will be of interest. But with the budget, the city did secure $1 million in funding for the tree line trail conservancy for that project. And we'll help coordinate with the transfer those funds to the city, but, yeah, you know, a little bit different process, but the budget got done and government didn't shut down. And now we've really, pivoted to, the House took a couple weeks off, but, very active session and a lot of policy work happening. So you've probably seen in the updates, lots of movement on bills, lots of hearings and deliberations, and I think that'll continue through the end of the year. And a lot of, you know, folks in both chambers, both sides of the aisle, looking at now and even into early, maybe first quarter of the year, the opportunity to kind of move some of this policy. So a lot of things that we're focused on that front. I don't know, Aaron, if there's any more you wanted to add just overall on the state update? No?
Yeah.
And then just wanted to flag, obviously a lot going on, but one of the bigger issues what, or I guess a couple things, but one in particular, bills that were just introduced, and again in that report on the video franchise fees. These bills were introduced last session, were very contentious. MML was very engaged in opposing, but have been reintroduced some changes that were trying to accommodate some of the local government concerns, the franchise fees, in case you all, just as a reminder, those help pay for the local PEG channels. And obviously with streaming and that, a lot of that revenue concerns long-term about the funding to continue to support those channels. But they have been introduced, and you know, we're expecting there will probably be a hearing before long in the House. We'll see where the Senate's at with those, but I just want to flag that as probably one of the bigger issues that may be moving soon and of particular interest. Obviously a lot of activity, but that one, just because of the concerns that continue to be raised about impacts to those revenue streams. So share that. And then the bills I think will be read in tomorrow, but just may be of interest to the city as well. Bills being reintroduced from last session that would, they're calling it the essential services. It's for short-term rentals, allowing communities that have hotel motel taxes to have that same level of tax applied to short-term rentals. That would be direct revenue to the cities, not go to a convention and visitor bureau, but directly to the cities to help with local services and kind of the demands that short-term rentals put on. So those bills will be, they were turned in, so will be read in tomorrow. We don't have the numbers yet, but there will be an effort to push those, and I believe the mayor has lent his name in support of those, but just want to flag that.
Okay. Any questions on that?
This is maybe more for Mariah, but I think this committee, and I think council probably will be keen to know where that extra $5.49 million in new road funding goes. Brett Morgan sent a letter saying, you know, that's a 33% increase, and I think for our public services staff, it would be interesting to know from them, you know, what that does and what that accomplishes, and whether that's used on trunk lines or city-owned roads, local streets, anything like that. We're grateful, and I'm very grateful to our state delegation for advocating for that, and it was a priority, Brett Morgan. And also this committee, I mean, we did put it on our policy agenda, so, but want to see where it goes.
Absolutely, and we can make sure that there's something delineated during the budget process to make sure that we highlight that, and then it's apparent where that funding will be impacted.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Okay, any other questions? Comments? Concerns? Okay, great. Let's move on to the last item, the number 3 Barton Dam fencing. And, yeah,
Go ahead.
kick it off for us.
So this came up in the last, Park Advisory Commission meeting. We had a presentation, I think, from our staff, but also, I believe also worked with a consultant to, understand what the FERC requirements for the Barton Dam will be. And because that's a dam that generates power, it's regulated under the federal, commission, and they have to, secure the act. They have like very strict requirements. And I believe their first sort of proposal is to put some fencing that just really makes that area not usable to pedestrians, not usable to canoes, really wide fence. And I guess the city has come back with a sort of a counter proposal saying, okay, let's not obstruct the pedestrian path, pull in fencing closer to the actual facility of the dam, allowing still for like a canoe launch, and more specifically also a canoe portage that can, so people can continue their use of the river unobstructed. We want to know, I guess, what our options are in terms of advocating for this, and, are there any, I guess, pieces of success in terms of maybe getting some of these federal agencies to listen on this issue. And I would even open it broader too, because they talked about the dam generating $300,000 in revenue, but I'm not 100% sure the amount of revenue equals the amount of, I guess, headache perhaps. So kind of weighing other options, I'm open to that as well.
Yes, and if I could also add, I reached out after Councilmember Watson and I spoke. I reached out to Congresswoman Dingell, and she's had a member of her staff reach out as well. I know that Mr. Landefeld is working to set up a conversation there. And so, Andy, I don't know if it makes sense to kind of pull you into that conversation when it takes place, but just making sure that we're kind of all aligned, because it sounds like Congresswoman Dingell is willing to kind of advocate to the extent that she can on our behalf as well.
Yeah, I did go back and watch that hearing, and I heard the discussion about getting her involved, and so that was one of the questions I had jotted down, is if contact had been made with her office yet. I would like to be involved in that. I mean, a lot of this is going to be sort of like, putting the pressure on the agency to sort of accept the alternative, that it meets their criteria in order to provide the safety that is required because of the power generation, but yet not cut that off from the community. And so having her weigh in, her committee has jurisdiction over the Department of Energy, which is helpful. Mrs. Dingell is exceptional at rallying folks within the delegation to add pressure to. So if this is one of those instances where we need to hear from Democrats and Republicans, I have no doubt that she is the right person to do that. And so it would be helpful to me to be engaged in that, only from the standpoint if there is a little bit of additional work or for dogging other offices to get them to sign on to letters or anything like that, that I'm just in it from the beginning so that I can coordinate with her office in order to do that. But if you guys have already made the contact, then I just would like to sort of be included in those discussions, so I'm up to speed when I talk with them. And I'll see, it's been a little strange in Washington with the shutdown and when they're in town and when they're out of town, but I am expecting to see Mrs. Dingell at a minimum in a week at an event, and depending on, I know they're back this week, just in town for in case something happens. And so I will try to at least make a point that, hey, I'm up to speed on this and I can help, run down information or sort of get back in touch with them if they're not as responsive as we want them to be. Is there a time essence on this? The one thing I didn't walk away from listening to that discussion was I heard that the alternative was provided to FERC, but it wasn't clear to me if this is something that like they take under advisement for weeks, whether you expect to hear back quickly, and sort of when all of this has to be resolved.
I do think the goal of the whole project was to be done by 27, maybe starting in
unless any staff that's on here knows, I think we can circle back with staff on that.
Yeah.
But otherwise, and Andy, so far the staff member who has reached out is Georgia from her district staff. So
Okay.
it's the local staff at this stage, but when we see that meeting come through, we'll make sure to loop you in as well.
That would be great.
Maybe I'll just loop you in now because I think it would be important to make sure that if we're scheduling something that it aligns with when you're available.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, I appreciate being included in it. I have, like I said, I went back and watched that meeting just to try to get a little better understanding of what's going on here. So certainly seems like the FERC proposal seems a little unreasonable, and so it seems as though hopefully they will be willing to work with the city to find a solution that works for everyone.
I think maps.
Yeah, there are, I mean, this is just one, just to see real quick.
Okay.
But yeah, I can send you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay.
But one thing about this area, I mean, it is just an area of significant investment. I mean, we just got or 2 times ago, we got the appropriation, I think, for the border part in the Van Beer Tunnel that's like fully opening on Wednesday, actually. And it is a regional trail because it, connects to the rest of the county on this border-to-border trail. I know that's been a priority of, Rep. Conlin and our county partners as well. So it's not just Ann Arbor, this is kind of a regional.
One thing I wasn't totally clear on from just listening to it, and maybe I just didn't scribble it down in my notes, but what prompted FERC to now decide that they had to fence off like that whole embankment? What was the impetus for that? Is there something new in terms of the power generation, or did a reg change, or?
I think it was a reg change and sort of a reassessment.
So that was gonna be my question. I feel like we're kind of debating what level of fencing is needed, but I'm curious, from my watching of the PAC meeting, it looked like FERC recently designated Barton Dam as like the highest designation of security threat, which seems out of context, like it just doesn't seem like it quite fits. I'm no engineer when it comes to dams and national security, but it doesn't seem like Barton Dam would be the highest security threat. So I'm curious, is there any way as part of our efforts to get FERC to downgrade us to like a lower security threat, and perhaps fencing isn't even needed, or a much, lower level of security is needed, rather than our current discussion, which seems to be where would this high level fencing go? So that was
I think that's all part of what our discussion with the Congresswoman should be, and if she can help facilitate the meeting with FERC to have that discussion with sort of either her or her people sort of standing there. I always say the same thing about the congressional involvement. It doesn't necessarily give you the answer you want, but it almost always raises the level of accountability. Those agencies know that they actually have to have good answers. And I suspect they really know they have to have good answers with Mrs. Dingle sitting there, because she's going to ask them a lot of questions and sort of hold their feet to the fire as to why they're doing this and why they're doing it now. And so even that information, if we don't get necessarily the answer we want, at least understanding what the logic is behind all of this could be very helpful in trying to determine what type of a compromise solution we could offer to them that would be acceptable if they don't take what the initial alternative is that was suggested.
I can circle with Derek as well, Derek and Josh, and we can have kind of a round table just to get all of the background on it before we meet with Dingle's office as well, Andy.
Perfect.
And I do think public services is involved too, just because of the power on the power dams. They have as well.
Gotcha.
All right. Anything else on that?
No, I would not.
Thank you very much. Do we have any information or upcoming business? No. Okay. That brings us to public comment. And we have no one in-house for public comment. Do we have any callers on the line? We're not panelists. One attendee. All right. If you'd like to participate in public comment, please press *9. no interest in public comment. Public comment is closed. Can I get a motion to adjourn? Regina, Alec, all those in favor? Opposed? We are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody.